I soar through skies with wings of white. Near ocean shores I take my flight. My cry is loud, my feathers bright. I'm a coastal bird, a common sight. What am I? If you guess seagulls, you are 100% correct. And if you guess that, I really am impressed because I live in Oklahoma and we don't see a lot of seagulls. But in today's lesson, we'll be taking this image of perched seagulls and making it picture frame worthy. Let's get started. Your directions. Open this document using Photoshop. Number 1. Remove the distractions in the background using the spot healing brush or clone stamp tool. Number 2. Use the blur tool to blur the 4 seagulls in the back so only the bird closest to you on the right is the main focal point of the image. Number 3. Use the stroke of the rectangle tool with no fill to add a border to the image. Add effects such as drop shadow to add depth. Okay, so let's walk through this. And as number 1 says, we'll start by removing the distractions in the back of the image. And there are just a few things to touch up here. So these few little specks, and we'll also remove this little bird in the back as well. So we can do that using several tools, but we are going to use the spot healing brush today. So my workspace is set to essentials, and I'm going to use the spot healing brush tool. Keyboard shortcut, letter J, and I'm just going to draw over the little part that I want to remove. Now that's gone, and I'm just going to do that over any parts that I want to remove from the background of the image. This little section, just draw over it, and now it's gone. So that's how we can quickly just touch up little small spots. If you had a really long spot, you might want to work in smaller sections in order to make that spot healing brush work, or you may have to use a different tool. So we'll also zoom in, and there is another seagull that's standing here in the back. It looks a little odd because we can only see the neck and kind of the tail feathers of it. So we'll go ahead and remove this one too, but we'll use the clone stamp tool for this one. But I just want to use the stamp tool to move portions of the water over this portion of the seagull back here. So switching to the clone stamp tool, it's the letter S on my keyboard. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller by using my bracket key. And that's because the part that I want to sample from, we've got this limited area here because of the legs of the seagull. Otherwise, I would have to come out to maybe the open water and bring some of that down. So let's give it a try. I'm going to start right about here to make my selection. So I'm going to hold Option on my keyboard or Alt on a Windows keyboard. Left click once with my mouse. My brush is now loaded, as you can see. Then I'm going to go over towards the neck of the seagull and just begin to paint along the left side. Now I can try to carry this as much as I can across to the other side, but I'm just watching where that plus sign is touching. And then I may need to make a new selection shortly. Okay, so this is doing pretty well. The further we go down, I'm just going to go ahead and make a new selection here. So make a new selection, hold Option or Alt, left click once, and come back this way. And I'm just going to continue to do this until I've removed the majority of the white from this area. And then I'm going to come back over on this side and do the same thing so I can work from right to left. So hold Option on my keyboard, make this selection, load my brush, and then just start to paint it away. Okay, before I deal with the tail feather, I'm going to zoom out a little bit and see what that's looking like here. If it's looking like there are too many waves in here that's not consistent with the rest of the image, then I can go back in and just make my brush a little bit bigger, pick up another selection, and just come through and kind of even out some of the waves. I can also adjust my opacity slider down a bit and come through and just make it a little softer in that area as well. It's almost like you are blending everything together. Okay, then I will finish up with the tail feathers and we'll be ready to go on to the next step. So now we've removed the bird that's in the back there, and I'm just going to look through the image and touch up any other little things that might be floating out here. I'm not sure what this is. I'll go ahead and remove it as well using the spot peeling brush. And just cleaning up any other little particles. Now, if you notice, if you are trying to make a long selection and it gets a little bit distorted, just go back and undo it and make a smaller selection with that healing brush. Okay, that's looking how I want it to look. So locate the blur tool on the toolbar, and there is no keyboard shortcut for the blur tool, so you just have to click on that tool. But this will allow us to blur parts of the image without having to use a filter to do so. I'm just going to start to click. My strength is at 100% right now, and I'm in a normal blend mode. So I'm just going to start to paint across the bird, and let's see if you can see. All right, so it's starting to blur this bird. I want the focal point to be the bird on the right. So we can see a distinct difference between this bird and the one here. So let's go ahead and do the second one. And you're just clicking and holding and dragging like you're painting and just blurring over the body of the bird. Okay. Zoom out. You can see how that's coming along. And then I'm going to do this one in the back. Okay, so now we see the star of the show is this bird here on the right. Okay, now that we have those 4 birds blurred, and you decided, oh wait, I don't want to have all of these birds blurred. I want to go back and undo it. You may think that you would just switch to your sharpen tool and that would bring that back into focus. But let's look at what happens when we sharpen it. And I'm just clicking on this bird, and I don't see that anything is happening other than it's becoming very pixelated. So this is not an efficient way to unblur it. What you can use would be your history brush tool. And that's the letter Y on your keyboard. And that tool restores parts of an image to an earlier state. So if I were to go back to this first bird here, then I could use my history brush and it will unblur that for me, taking that back to a prior history state, which is pretty cool. There are more than one ways to go back in history. You do have your histories panel. And if you pull it down, depending on what your settings are, 50 prior states, so that you could go back in history to a prior state. But once you click, it deletes everything that happened after that and you start from that spot. So your histories panel does come in handy when you want to go back if there's some mistake that you have made. And that's the same as doing Command and the letter Z, except you're able to go back to a specific spot with your histories panel tool. If you're ever working on something where you'll be doing a series of a lot of small clicks and you need to have more than 50 history states in your histories panel, you can, before you start working, go to Photoshop, go to Settings, and go to Performance. And where it says History States, you can open this up and you can increase that up to 1,000 history states. The issue with increasing your history states is that it can cause Photoshop to run a lot slower because it's trying to reserve memory space for that. So just be aware of that. 50 is pretty standard for the default on history states, but you can change that. Now that we have our seagull that we want to be the star of the show, then we can add a frame to this by using our rectangle tool. So I'm just going to go to my rectangle shape, and if yours is not showing, just left click and hold it and switch to your rectangle tool. Okay, so I just want to add a frame to this, like we're putting it in like a little picture frame or just making a little border for it. And since I'm doing a rectangle, I don't want to have the inside of the rectangle filled. So my fill, I want to be set to nothing. So the red line with the white box, that is no color, and I want to click that for my fill. So I'll have no color in the middle, but my stroke, or the outside of my rectangle, that's what I want to work with. So I'll go ahead and click on the stroke and bring up these options. If I wanted to do a solid color for the border, then I could use one that I've recently used, or I could open up my color picker and pick a specific color, but I want to do a gradient for my border. So instead of going no fill here, I want to go to this icon here, which is our gradient option, and click on that. Here I have some gradients that I've used before. Photoshop also has some presets available to you in all of these folders. If you wanted to set your own gradient color, you can set your foreground and your background color. And if you go to your basics folder, you'll see that your foreground and background color is an option for your gradient. I'm going to go ahead and use kind of this green, yellow to green for mine. You can choose whatever you would like for yours. Currently, my stroke size is at 7.41. I think I'm going to take that up to 10, the next level here, 10.14 for mine. And that's just the starting point. I can always change that if I need to later. Okay, so now I'm just going to take kind of the edge, and it doesn't really matter if you're right on the edge or next to the edge. Just get close because you can always stretch it afterwards. I'm just going to draw a little rectangle here. And that's very thin, so I'm just going to pump up or increase the size. Okay, so I can click off, and now I've got a bit of a border for my photo. And if I want to add a bit of depth, I can use that doing the effects. And I can do, drop shadow. Drop shadow is one of my favorites, but you've got outer glow, you've got inner glow, you've got some other options here. So I'm just going to adjust this so that it's coming from bottom to top, or top to bottom. So my border's kind of more on the bottom and on the inside than it is on the outside. So here are my settings for my drop shadow if you wanted to take a look at that. You can adjust yours to how you like it. You are the artist here, so you can design this the way that you want. Then I can click OK. And that's it. You will turn this in the way your teacher has requested. And I hope that you found this to be interesting and that you could bring your own photos in and do the same type of technique. If you enjoyed this tutorial, stay tuned for the next one.